Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're setting our sights on Salt Lake City. It's a really fascinating place, a story that stretches from pioneering ambition right through to its modern-day buzz.
Absolutely. And we've got a good mix of sources to dig into.
Yeah, we've gathered quite a bit historical stuff on how it all started, the latest demographic numbers, economic stats, a look at its culture, which is always evolving, and politics too.
It's a complex picture.
Definitely. So our mission really is to sift through all this information and pull out the most compelling bits for you, the surprising facts, the key insights that really paint a picture of this unique city.
Salt Lake City. Yeah, the name itself conjures up certain images, doesn't it?
It does.
But looking at our sources, the reality is, well, it's much more layered than any single idea. So where should we start? The beginning seems logical.
Exactly. Let's jump back to July 24th, 1847. That's the key date. Mormon pioneers, led by Brigham Young, looking for a place of refuge.
And they found this valley, initially called Great Salt Lake City.
Right, they dropped the Great later, in 1868. But what strikes me immediately is just the sheer boldness of it all. Arriving in this semi-arid place, and their first thought isn't just survival, it's building something lasting.
Yeah.
So priority one, irrigation. A massive network right away.
Absolutely critical. And the planning didn't stop there. You have the Plat of Zion.
Ah, yes, the grid system.
Originating right from Temple Square, laid out on a compass grid, very intentional. And those streets, famously wide.
The story goes, they needed to be wide enough for an ox team to turn around right, without bumping into the next lot.
That's the legend. It really speaks to foresight, planning for growth even then.
Incredible. And it wasn't long before it earned that nickname, the Crossroads of the West.
Makes sense.
Our sources point to a few things converging. Waves of westward immigration, mining booms drawing people in, and then the big one.
The railroad.
The Transcontinental Railroad, completed 1869 at Promontory Point, just up the way. That changed everything.
Sealed its fate as a hub.
And later, you had the Lincoln Highway coming through 1913, and now I-15 and I-80 slice right through it. Still very much a crossroads.
And even before the railroad, think about the communication challenge. The Pony Express started April 3rd, 1860.
Wow, yeah. St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California.
In 10 days. On horseback relays. It just highlights how vital connecting the West was, even that early. That first mailbag, the mochila, actually carried a message from President Buchanan.
No kidding.
Telegraphed part of the way, then carried by horse. Shows the urgency.
It's easy to get caught up in the sheer determination and ingenuity of the settlers, building a city out of the desert.
It is impressive technologically.
But our sources are also very clear. Their arrival had a truly devastating impact on the indigenous peoples already living there. We have to talk about that.
Absolutely crucial. It's not a comfortable part of the story, but it's essential. The consequences were immediate and, frankly, catastrophic.
Take the Paiute, for instance. The numbers are just staggering.
Within 25 years of contact, their population crashed by an estimated 90%.
90%. Just let that sink in.
And the reasons listed in our sources are grim reading, introduced diseases.
Right, no immunity.
Forced displacement from ancestral lands, from vital water sources, the destruction of their culture, their economy, even coerced labor.
It's a brutal reality of westward expansion, the human cost.
And you have this stark contrast, right? This meticulous planning, the building of the city by the settlers happening at the exact same time as the rapid decline and immense suffering of the original inhabitants.
Yeah, it really forces you to think about the different perspectives, the different narratives of that history.
Definitely. So, moving forward in time into the 20th century, Salt Lake City really starts to transform.
It shifts towards becoming more of an industrial urban center.
Early on, mining and smelting were still pretty dominant industries.
And you start to see a proper central business district forming, maybe not perfectly aligned with that original Plat of Zion, but taking shape.
Right. And the city starts adopting modern urban features. An electric streetcar system incredibly early.
When was that?
First cars in 1872, but fully electric by 1889. It ran all the way until 1945.
Wow. And things like full-time police and fire departments too, I assume?
Exactly. Essential city services.
Interestingly, though, the sources mention a period later in the 20th century where the city's population kind of stagnated.
Yeah, growth shifted outwards to the suburbs, a familiar story for many American cities.
Inner city decline became a worry.
It did. But then things picked up again in the 1990s, and since 2000, the population's actually grown by about 5%. So a bit of a comeback for city living.
And alongside that, the type of population has shifted too. demographics have changed quite a bit.
Significantly, the Hispanic population is now around 22%, which is substantial.
Mm.
There's a very visible, vibrant LGBT community and also a large Pacific Islander population, particularly in the wider Salt Lake Valley area, around 2%.
So it's a much more diverse city today than maybe its historical image suggests.
Absolutely. That increasing diversity is key to understanding modern Salt Lake City.
Which leads us nicely into the economic picture now, say around 2022 to 2025. Our sources give some interesting comparisons with Denver.
Another big Mountain West city, yeah.
The cost of living comparison seems, well, a bit mixed. Some sources say Salt Lake is much cheaper, others say they're pretty close.
It gets interesting when you drill down. Like, median rent for a 2-bedroom apartment seems lower in Salt Lake City compared to Denver.
Okay.
But the median home price is apparently slightly higher.
Huh. So renting might be easier, buying harder.
Potentially. And transportation costs are reportedly higher in Denver, but food costs are a bit lower there, so it depends on your spending patterns, I guess.
What about jobs?
The job market looked really tight. Back in November 2022, unemployment was just 2.1%.
Wow, that's low.
Lowest since 2000, apparently. And they were projecting annual job growth around 2.3% for 2023 through 2025. Non-farm payrolls were up 3% year over year back then.
Sounds pretty dynamic. Any specifics on industries?
Well, the average tech talent wage in 2023 was cited at over $85,000.
Solid number.
And the overall metro GDP in 2022 was quite substantial, around $135 billion. So yeah, the economic engine seems to be running pretty well.
Definitely points to a healthy, growing urban economy, attracting talent.
Seems that way.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Arts, culture, and what some sources call a counterculture. This sounds intriguing.
It is,
Yeah.
because I think the external perception of Salt Lake City can sometimes be a bit uniform.
Yeah, maybe focus too much on the LDS influence.
Exactly. But the sources reveal a really vibrant and increasingly diverse arts and music scene. And it's not brand new either. There was always an undercurrent, even early on.
But it got linked more with progressive ideas later on.
In the latter half of the 20th century, yeah. You see more connections with progressive social and political movements bubbling up in the art scene.
And today, I mean, Sundance Film Festival puts it on the international map culturally.
Absolutely. Huge event. Plus, the city apparently has a high number of artists per capita and decent support, public and private, for the arts.
So what about this counterculture idea?
Well, some sources describe it as being fueled by, liberal and sometimes even socialist ideals. It shows up in things like street activism.
Protests, things like that?
Yeah, and also expressive public art murals, graffiti. And even just distinct lifestyle choices, skateboarding culture, tattoos, piercings, seen as sort of declarations of autonomy.
Kind of an anti-establishment vibe.
That's how some sources frame it, yeah. Often in response to, or maybe dialogue with, the more conservative and LDS cultural backdrop.
That tension can probably spark some interesting creativity.
I think so. It gives the city a unique cultural texture, and you see it reflected in the sheer number of festivals.
Right, the sources list a bunch. Utah Pride Festival, Living Traditions Festival.
Craft Lake City DIY Festival, Greek Festival, Italian festivals, lots of film festivals beyond Sundance too, like Film Quest. Damn these heels.
And it hosts big conventions now too, right? Like Comic-Con?
Salt Lake Comic-Con, yeah. Crystal Mountain PonyCon, International Tattoo Convention. It draws big crowds for all sorts of interests.
Really showcases how multifaceted the city's cultural life is now.
It definitely offers a lot.
Okay, let's pivot to politics and how the city is run. It's a strong mayor-council system.
Right. And as of 2025, the mayor is Aaron Mendenhall, a Democrat.
And the city council is the legislative side. 7 members from different districts, elected nonpartisan.
Officially nonpartisan, yeah. But that's where it gets complicated.
How so?
You have this interplay, officially nonpartisan local elections, but clear partisan leanings often exist among voters and officials. And then you have the state level.
Which is heavily Republican.
Yeah.
Legislature, statewide offices.
Exactly. And that creates a real dynamic. Our sources talk about legislative gerrymandering being an issue.
The idea that district maps are drawn to dilute the voting power of more progressive city areas.
That's the argument some make. And the state legislature has significant power. They can influence or even just override local city policies.
Through laws, funding decisions, preempting local rules.
All of the above.
Well,
Which leads to this concept some sources call contained liberalism.
meaning?
Salt Lake City often elects Democrats. It's generally more progressive than the rest of Utah. But its ability to enact its own agenda can be, contained or limited by the state.
Interesting. What about the Utah model? That sounds like it could also play a role.
Yeah, that emphasis on consensus building, which can be good, but sometimes if Salt Lake City's goals are different from the state's priorities, that consensus model can be a hurdle.
So it sounds like the city government might feel a bit constrained sometimes.
Potentially. But the sources also highlight a really strong counterweight: civic engagement.
People getting involved.
Very much so. Lots of community organizations, official channels like community councils, boards, commissions, plus a whole ecosystem of nonprofits, grassroots, activist groups tackling issues like homelessness, equity, preservation.
So the grassroots energy is important.
Absolutely essential, especially in that political context. It helps shape the conversation and push for change from the ground up.
Okay, let's look at the physical city. Urban planning, design, infrastructure. That original grid is still influential, right?
Oh, definitely. You still see the bones of it, and the legacy of needing irrigation shapes things too. But today, the focus is really shifting towards sustainability and livability.
More public transit, more green space.
Exactly. And trying to deal with the environmental impacts of growth. Water's a huge one. Air quality, too. Improving mobility, getting ready for climate change impacts.
Public transit seems key. The Utah Transit Authority, UTA, saw ridership jump 15.5% in 2024. That's pretty significant.
It is. And they're putting money into the TRIX light rail system. TRIX Forward, they call it.
New trains, station upgrades.
Line realignments extending the S-Line streetcar. Though, fair warning, track maintenance in summer 2025 is going to cause some disruptions.
Good to know. Any other big transit projects?
A new TRX station out in Daybreak Field, South Jordan, expected in 2025. And improvements to the front-runner commuter rail, things like all-level boarding, plans for double tracking eventually.
So investing in rail, what about bikes and pedestrians?
Big focus there, too. You've got the Green Loop project, this idea for a continuous 4-mile green corridor, paths, parks for walking and biking.
Sounds nice.
And more practical stuff, too.
Yeah.
Protected bike lanes, like on 300 West, expanding multi-use trails, the Folsom Trail, 9-line trail extension, creating neighborhood byways, which are quieter streets for biking and walking.
And just basic safety stuff, crosswalks, sidewalks.
Yeah, upgrades there, too. It's all part of trying to make it easier and safer to get around without a car.
So with all this going on, the economy, culture, urban planning, how do people actually feel about living there? What's the quality of life like?
Well, we have that biannual survey from April 2024. Generally, people rated their quality of life pretty high, average score of 72 out of 100, and that was actually an increase from the previous year.
That's positive. Did they feel the city was heading in the right direction?
A majority did, 59%. Also an improvement.
Okay, but were there any clouds on the horizon?
One persistent one. Less than half, only 45%, felt their city tax dollars were well spent. That seems to be an ongoing concern.
What about city services?
Kind of a mixed bag there, too. High marks for social workers, 9/11, fire, paramedics. Lower satisfaction with homeless engagement and street maintenance.
And what did people want the city to spend money on?
Top priorities were street and road maintenance, makes sense, given the lower satisfaction there, and city parks and open spaces.
So overall, pretty positive, but definitely some specific areas needing attention.
That seems fair. Interestingly, most people hadn't been to community council meetings, but those who had thought they were important, may be potential there for more engagement.
Right. Okay, last big piece. The environment. The setting is obviously dramatic.
Absolutely. You've got the Great Salt Lake nearby, the Wasatch Range on one side, the Ochre Mountains on the other. It's stunning.
Does the lake itself affect the weather much?
It does. That lake effect contributes about 10% of the annual precipitation, apparently.
Interesting. And the climate generally?
Big swings between seasons. Summers get hot, average 56 days over 90 Fahrenheit. Winters are cold, but usually not brutally so. Snowfall averages around 60 inches, mostly November to April.
But there are environmental challenges too.
Big ones. Air quality is a major issue. Salt Lake City has unfortunately ranked among the worst in the U.S. at times, especially with winter inversions.
Right, trapping pollution in the valley.
Exactly. And then there's the Great Salt Lake itself. Its water levels have been declining dramatically.
Raising huge ecological concerns, right? Dust, ecosystem collapse.
Serious worries. Plus, the whole region is in an active fault zone. Earthquake risk is definitely part of the reality there.
So pulling it all together, our sources seem to paint Salt Lake City as a place of dualities almost.
That's a good way to put it. Faith and enterprise coexisting. Tradition and innovation pushing against each other. That sense of being geographically isolated, yet also integrated as a crossroads. Communal ideals alongside strong individualism.
It's a complex mix. And looking forward, the biggest challenge seems clear.
Managing growth, doing it equitably, doing it sustainably, that seems paramount.
Because the pressures are immense. The housing crisis needs addressing. Those environmental impacts, water, air have to be mitigated. Infrastructure needs investment to keep up.
If they don't manage that growth well, our sources suggest it could really undermine the quality of life that makes the city attractive in the first place.
So quite a journey we've taken. From that initial bold vision in the desert, becoming a vital crossroads, through all the demographic and economic shifts.
To this vibrant, sometimes surprising cultural scene, navigating a tricky political landscape, and now facing these really significant challenges around growth and sustainability.
It's a unique story.
It really is. Which brings us to maybe a final thought, something for you, the listener, to chew on.
Okay.
Given these ongoing tensions we've discussed, the city's often progressive local values, rubbing up against the broader conservative state context, what kinds of innovations, what kinds of compromises might shape Salt Lake City's path forward?
How does it stay distinctively Salt Lake City while tackling these huge growth pressures?
Exactly. There are no easy answers, but thinking about that interplay, that balancing act, that's likely where the next chapter of Salt Lake City's story will be written.